If you want to be a better coach, this is the video for you. We're going to be talking about 3 important tips that are going to level your coaching up. The first one's really simple. You could start it right now and become a better coach because of it. The next 2 are actually quite challenging. You need to reflect on your own practices and you need to be courageous in trying something new. It's hard, yes, but you will get better. Now, let's get into it. Even if you're a player watching this, I think you should watch it as well because there's a high chance that any of these tips could actually support your coach in becoming better. And most coaches actually want to become the best possible coach for their players. Maybe sending this to them may be helpful. Let's get into it. The first tip, like I said before, you can start doing right now and you will get better at coaching. It is using a tool that is in most volleyball halls, and if it's not, we need to get it into your hall. The tool I'm talking about is a whiteboard. Now, there are many reasons why a whiteboard is so awesome. The first and the most simple thing is it shows your plan out in front of you. A lot of coaches that I've seen make up the plan on the spot, and because of that, they are doing just silly things. They don't link things together. They don't have a efficiently run training session. If we write it down in front of us, the first thing we see is what we're actually doing and are the drills actually connected in any way. That's really important to make a really efficient and effective training. There needs to be some crossover from drill to drill. It's not just like, oh, we're doing serving now, we're doing setting now, we're doing digging now. Or in any sport, it's like we need to have a cohesive flow. It's sort of like writing an essay. You can't just have random ideas on the page, you link them. And that's just like this. We need to write it down so we can link the activities to each other so it's more effective. So that's the first thing that gets better. Your session gets better because it's more planned. It's out in front of you. Awesome. The next thing that gets better is the way we educate our players. So many people say, hey, I'm a visual learner. I need to visualize it. Hey, I'm a textile learner. I like touching things. Oh, I'm a verbal learner. I need to verbalize it to learn. In reality, what the science shows us is we're multimodal learners. Yeah, we're not visual learners. We're multimodal learners. The more modes we learn something in, the more it sticks in our brain. So me verbalizing this to you is one mode of information. The next mode of information could be a visual. Yeah, you're seeing me, that's sort of a visual and I'm putting my energy into the camera, but a more visual way of learning is by reading. So instead of relying on one mode of information, using my voice, I'm relying on 2. So I'm doubling the amount of information going into your brain. I don't need to double the amount of words I say. I've already done that with the information in 2 different modes. I've just doubled the effectiveness of my coaching just by writing it down, because coaching at the end of the day is making this information go into someone else's head. And if we can do that more effectively, we're better at coaching. Start writing your plans down on a whiteboard. It also really helps players who struggle to connect with a voice. I was like this, and I still am like this. As a player, I literally have no idea what a coach is saying unless it's written down on the board. My subtitles! Where are my subtitles? That's pretty much what we're talking about. We need multiple modes of information going into our brains. When I listen to a coach, even today, and they say, hey, we're playing Bernie's, that's 2 balls. 1 touch, you need to win both balls to win the point. That's a lot of information. You may have gotten overwhelmed. You may be asking, what was the second rule again? Oh, now you're gonna put your hand up and ask me, and everyone's gonna think you're an idiot. Let's skip that massive insecure rant and let's just read it off the board. Oh my goodness, the second rule is 1 touch. How easy is that? So now I'm saying it, and if people miss important information, they don't need to disrupt your class. They don't need to put their hand up and risk being embarrassed in front of the group. They can read it on the board. Incredible. Oh my goodness. That goes on to my third point about this whiteboard thing. What happens when a player comes in late and they have no idea what's going on? Without a whiteboard, that player needs to come up to you and say, hey, what are the rules? What are we playing? What are we doing? And you need to explain it. So you're putting all your time and effort into this one player when you could be giving it to multiple players. Now with a whiteboard, somebody comes in late. Hey sir, sorry I'm late. What are we doing? Instead of giving them all your time, this is all you need to do. Check the board, jump in. Oh, so easy. You don't need to switch your focus. You can just tell the player, hey, take a look at the board. Oh, incredible. Oh my goodness. Or should I say incrediboard? Am I right, guys? Am I right, guys? Now the last reason I want to say whiteboards are incredible because it helps you stay focused as a coach. I know so many coaches who go off on tangents. They start talking about things that aren't important. It's because they've just sort of grasped onto an idea and they just follow that idea. With a whiteboard, it keeps you focused. Oh, what am I talking about? What's my workshop on? It's burger hand setting. I'm not going to be talking about digging. Our focus is burger hand setting. So to stay focused, we write it down. And I've talked about how this helps the students. This helps me a lot. Yeah, it helps me. It's sort of like, what the hell are we doing now? And then I can read it. Especially with notices. I struggle with notices. I always have notices here. I always forget to say really important things because I'm coaching, blah, blah, blah. And then I say, hey, goodbye. And then everyone goes and I'm like, oh, I forgot the really important thing. It focuses us, but it also reminds us what we need to say when we're getting carried away with our own world and passion of coaching. So whiteboard, incredible. Use it if you have one. If you don't have one, get your school to buy one. Get your club to buy one. It will level your coaching up by 1,000,000,000%. You can quote me on that. 1,000,000,000. You know how many zeros that is? Like 9 or something. Don't quote me on that. I actually don't know. All right, moving on. The next point is about what's in your session. There needs to be more gameplay in your session. I don't know how you coach. I don't know what you do. I don't know what your routines is. I don't know much, but I know for a fact there isn't enough gameplay. Now, I don't mean 6v6 gameplay like it needs to be a game, it needs to be a ref, you need to play in position. I mean there needs to be a score. There needs to be a net. There needs to be people competing. That's gameplay. People are competing. Look at my session. 1 hour and a half. Bernie's is a game. 1v1 is a game. You have a workshop. 2v2 is a game. 3v3 is a game. 70% of my session is gameplay because I want players to get better at gameplay. The biggest thing in volleyball, the biggest thing in sport, when you're coaching is the context of the skill is so important. So that's why when I see these coaches on Instagram say, hey, you need to dig at this wall 15 times and you'll become like the best player in the world and go play for Australia. No, that's wrong. You need to play games. Digging against the wall is good if you have literally nothing else to do. But if you can compete, if you can play with at least one other person, you will get better at volleyball. Oh my goodness, I'm so passionate about this. Yeah, the context is the most important part. The skill itself is insignificant. It's the context around that skill that builds these neural pathways in your head to become an elite athlete. So if we want our athletes to be elite and the best, we need to provide them with the context and the gameplay that gets them there. So many coaches have 80% of their session full with technique-based stuff. They're doing flow drills, not doing enough, okay? Because they're learning the technique. The technique starts and ends with a movement. Gameplay is what cements the skill in our brains. Think about when you play volleyball. When you're on court, how many times do you touch the ball? 5 minutes? 3 minutes? It's less than 5 seconds. The contact you have on the ball is less than 5 seconds. So why should we put 80% of our time into 5 seconds of the game? The other 59 minutes of that game, you are reading, you are watching, you are reacting, you are playing, you're competing. We need to practice that 95% of the game, and we need to put it into our trainings. If we don't, you're letting your players down. They are not becoming better because of you. So take this to heart. And believe me, you need to provide the best opportunities for your players to get better. And if you don't, they will stay mediocre. They will get frustrated at their growth, and they may even quit. To avoid that, we need to include at least 10% more gameplay. Let's start with 10%. So if usually you have 15 minutes, let's go for 16 minutes. Let's go for 17 minutes. Let's do small steps. We need more gameplay in our session. If you don't, you're letting your players down. Now, the most important thing about gameplay is we're learning multiple skills. I always make them score. You play differently when there's a score on the line. If you are 10 points down, there is no way you're going for the jump toppy. There is no way you would play differently. We need our players to be thinking that way in training. We need our players to have that critical thought. Well, what score is it? What should I do in this situation? What's going to happen if I do this? We need them to have consequences to their actions, because if they don't, they just go out and they're a bit silly about it. Yeah, they just smack the ball into the back wall and you're like, dude, I need you to get better. Oh my goodness. And they're not taking it seriously. Add a score, see how their behavior changes. Make the score matter. The way I do it is I do 2v2 half court. Whoever wins goes up, whoever loses goes down. There's a natural consequence to not doing your best, to not playing an effective game. It's really simple. It's competition, and they get used to being winners. They get used to being losers. And I say that. Winners up, losers down. Oh, don't say the L word. Oh my goodness. Yeah, say the L word. Your players are going to lose more than they're going to win. So let's get used to using that word. That's what you need to do. Add more gameplay to your sessions, and your players will love you for it, and you will get better as a coach, because you're going to be looking at skills within the context of the game. You're not just going to be like, whoa, that's a really good spike in the warm-up, and then in game you're like, my kids, they forgot how to play. Yeah, they never learned how to play. They didn't forget, they never learned because you never taught them. Keep that in mind. This last tip that I'm going to share with you, it changed the way I approach coaching, and it changed the way my training sessions look like forever. I learned this from a coach and an author, John O'Sullivan. It is using the play, practice, play method. Let me break that down for you. Look at the board. Play, practice with a workshop, play again. I want my players to start the training session playing volleyball. Now, when we do that, one really brilliant thing happens. Players are excited to get to training on time. How many coaches out there have players that always rock up late? Probably thousands. And it's because they're not looking forward to training. They may look forward to getting better and being with their friends, but they're not looking forward to training. And that's because most coaches start their training session off with a lecture. Boring! Nobody loves lectures. They are the least effective way to learn. So stop that straight away. Start with a game. Bang. Now we're playing. Kids want to play volleyball. Kids want to play sport. So if we allow them to play sport, they're going to be excited to get here. So I rarely have players that are late anymore, because I start the session with games. No one wants to miss out on 1v1 or 2v2. No one wants to miss out on gameplay because it's fine. The good thing about this is if they are late, I can just add them to a team when they get there. You don't need to direct all your information to one player and ignore 16. You can just say, hey, we're doing this game, jump on with Timmy or Tommy or Sally, girl's name, or a non-sexual name, or a non-gendered name. We save the lecture for after the games. When we have conversations with our teams, it should be for no longer than 5 minutes. I don't believe any of my group discussions with my teams is longer than a minute. I try and make it really, really quick because I want them on the court. They will learn more from playing volleyball than what I will have to say to them. Unless I'm giving them like the way to get to heaven and I know exactly how to do that, it's not that important. Get your kids on the court as soon as possible. Play games. Then we get into an isolated workshop where we work on the skills. And then after that, we play some more games. We put that isolated skill into practice. Like I said at the start, the context of a skill is much more important than the skill itself. So once we teach the isolated skill, we can add that skill into gameplay. Take a look. Second touch must be a set. After we just isolated the skill of setting, now I'm forcing them to use it in game, which creates the neural pathways that makes players great. Now you may be asking, how long does this practice play go for? And I just go 30, 30, 30. 30% play, 30% practice, 30% play. So for an hour and a half session, it's half an hour gameplay at the start, half an hour to work on technical skills, and half an hour to put those skills back into gameplay. It's completely different to how we usually do it. A lot of coaches have 80% technique and then 20% gameplay. I'm flipping the script because I want my players to be playing games. Players play. You want your players to get better. They need to play. They need to compete. They need to practice all the soft skills like trust, communication, leadership. Everything's a skill and you get better at what you practice. I've been saying this for years. Oh, it's making sense now, baby. Woo! So moving on. One more note. This first play section is my assessment period. Now we're getting into the weeds. So if my focus is setting, I force my players to set. Setting only. And now I get to see my players set in action. I get to take a look at what they're good at, what they're bad at, and how we can get better. And it's not just, hey, show me your set against the wall. It is setting in game, which is the best part. You've seen all the teams that have a crazy warm-up. You're like, oh my gosh, they're gonna freaking kill us, man. And then they get into a game and they forget how to play. They don't forget. They literally don't know how to play. They just know how to warm up, all right? So if we get them playing here, we can assess the skills in game. So this workshop can be even more effective and tailor-made to the players. Instead of just something you made up yesterday, you have no idea where your players are at. You can assess them in this period, force them to do the skill, and then the workshop will be much more effective. So that's how you become better as a coach. There's 3 tips. 1, use the whiteboard. 2, play more games. 3, restructure your training to go play, practice, play. And you can structure it however you want, but the format play, practice, play has worked brilliantly for me. If you use these tips, you will get better. If you use the whiteboard, you will get better. If you have more gameplay in every single one of your sessions, your players will get better beyond your belief. It is harder. Yes. It is scarier. Yes. Trainings may be uglier because there's not so much form to it. Yes, that will happen. But because there is no form, because it's not rigid, your players will get better at playing a messy game. And guess what? Volleyball is messy. 80% of the game is out of system. Oh my goodness. So let's practice players playing the game. Oh my goodness, play the game! If you ignore these tips, if you're too scared to take the step into discomfort, you will stay mediocre as a coach. You will not be better. You will not be the best coach you can be for your players. So consider one tip that you can take into your next training session. Now, if you're in the Brisbane area and you are unsure what good coaching looks like, come to Skybound because I coach here every single week. Fridays, I have adult sessions. Wednesdays, I have my advanced juniors. And Sundays, I have my explorers. And they're my beginner to intermediate players. If you're a player, come join me. If you're an adult, come join me on Friday. And if you're a coach in a Brisbane local school, email me because I'm offering free training sessions to schools around Brisbane because I want you to get better. I want your coaching to get better because the only way forward to get better as a country is to improve everyone, not just our players, our coaches as well. Yes, I'm calling out all the organizations out there. Yeah, you can do better to provide for our coaches. You can do better. If you're a local school and you're interested in getting me in, I come to your school, I run a training sessions for your kids, and you get to observe what great training looks like. And if you want, I can actually mentor you and I can give you tips on how to get better as a coach. I want you to get better as a coach. That means Australia will become better at volleyball. I can only coach so many players in a week. If I coach 15 coaches in a week, their effect is multiplied. So please, it's in my best interest and yours, and it's also free. And I also like meeting people. I also like coaching. I also love just being needed. Isn't that a nice thing? We all yearn to be needed. And I need you to get better at coaching. You get better with your practice, so go practice being a better coach. I'd like to thank McGregor State High School for partnering with Coach Artie and Skybound Volleyball. They provide a volleyball excellence program for their players. If you don't know what that means, it means if you're a student, you get to have volleyball as a subject. You know, English, math, science, you get to have volleyball as a subject. That's insane. I wish I had an academy when I went to school. So if you're around the area and you're interested in getting better at volleyball, consider McGregor as your next high school. They will support you to be the best that you can be. I'll see you later.